Hi everyone. So in yesterday's video, we started talking about industrial recruitment and how that process works and what Breckinridge United's role is in that process. Today we want to look at this from a bit of a different angle and go step by step through our time working with Atlas on bringing their expansion to the Breckinridge County Industrial Park. I think this will be a really good discussion because it will hopefully help everyone see the different roles that we have to play in this process, the different stakeholders that we work with and different partners that we have, and why sometimes these things take longer than we'd like. We are constantly working in the background on projects that we don't get to talk to you all about while they're ongoing. So now that we have this one completed and we can talk about some of the details, I wanted to share that with you all to help everyone better understand the whole process of industrial recruitment. So to help kind of visually show this process, we've got our timeline moving along the bottom down here so you can follow along. And it's actually going to start all the way back in April or May, I don't remember which one, of 2018. And I had just started Breckinridge United and was at a chamber breakfast, and in a conversation with our then representative, Dean Shamor, he mentioned that he'd heard that Atlas was looking to expand and possibly find a site outside of Louisville. We were just getting started and didn't have a lot of real estate to show at that time, but I went ahead and reached out to my board directors and said, okay, who do we have a close relationship with at Atlas that we can start this conversation about what do we, Breckinridge United, need to do to get on your radar as a possible partner? So we wound up talking to Ron O'Donoghue, who later became a member of our board of directors, and we worked very closely with him on learning what Atlas was looking for. At the time, they were looking for an existing structure, something pretty small, that they could move into pretty quickly as an office for the field machine division. Over that summer, we showed them 3 different buildings that we had helped identify, and they ended up choosing one of those and moved the field machine division into that location in Harned in January of 2019. At that time, even then, we knew that was a temporary measure and would someday hopefully grow into this much larger project that we now have. Unfortunately, following 2019, there were some world events that delayed growth for everybody and put a lot of those next steps on hold. But we're really lucky that because we had such a strong relationship with Atlas, because they have so many employees that live here and are from this area and are connected to our school system, that we were able to keep those conversations ongoing even during that 2.5-year period where we weren't having a lot of active movement forward. So, zooming forward in the timeline, very lengthy, to May of 2021. So in May of last year, I received a call that a team from Atlas was prepared to come and look at a site here in Breckinridge County. So I met them out for our first site visit at the industrial park on May 21st. And this was a pretty broad visit. So we went over the price of the real estate, the size, some topographic maps, the existing utilities on site and in the park. Following that conversation, later that week, we sent them an initial proposal for them buying some of the land in our industrial park. And at this point, I want to introduce several of our partners that we work with on this process. So first of which is the Industrial Authority and Development Corporation. So the Industrial Authority is a quasi-government entity, and they are actually the entity that owns the industrial park here in Hardinsburg. And we are 2 separate offices, but we work very closely together, particularly on this project. And so in the course of building this proposal, we met with them to discuss their investment in the site and what they want to price the site at. We also had involved in this conversation the fiscal court and the city of Hardinsburg for their role in the road and in extending that asset and in the water and sewer system, which obviously is maintained by the city of Hardinsburg. So all 3 of those parties were in that initial conversation with Breckinridge United to build that proposal that we sent to Atlas. And then in the next couple of weeks, we really just were kind of going back and forth on what each party would need for this to be an attractive location for Atlas. After some internal discussion, they came back to us on July 22nd and wanted to enter into an option with the Industrial Authority to hold that property down while they invested in some due diligence. And so that is, again, some surveying of the site, some looking at the geotechnical to make sure everything is safe and a good place for them to build. They didn't want to make that investment without that guarantee from the Industrial Authority. So we did enter into an option in July. Seeing that we were moving forward and things were progressing well, at that point in August of 2021, we first introduced them to a representative with the Cabinet for Economic Development. The Cabinet's incentives, and there's a wide variety of different programs that a business can apply for, but those funds are really beneficial in helping a business make a decision on an expansion or starting a new business in a location, because it's very expensive. And so we don't have the financial resources here to offer them that kind of support, but the state, through their tax incentive programs, can really give them the boost they need to help grow in an area. In Breckinridge County specifically, because we are a rural community and because our income levels are lower than most counties in the state, we are what's called an enhanced incentives county. Being an enhanced incentives county, not only does Atlas have access to the regular tax incentives you get through an expansion project, but some elevated levels of incentives. So we wanted to start that process early on and build that connection with the Cabinet, knowing that might become a critical part of the conversation later. So we've got the option in place, we've had these initial conversations. We then have a bit of a pause, and we don't have any sincere progress until December. And again, we were in contact this whole time, but this is kind of the nature of economic development, is a bit of a hurry up and wait. We present what we're doing, and then it takes some time to go through all these details. But December 16th of 2021, we got the call that they were interested in moving forward. And so we received our first proposal from them to purchase 10 acres in the industrial park on December 21st. That very day, we organized a meeting with myself and some Breckinridge United representatives, with the Industrial Authority, with the City of Hardinsburg, with Fiscal Court. And all of us in the room discussed that initial proposal and identified a few places where we wanted to clarify some points. We got back to them with a counter proposal addressing those issues on December 23rd. And those discussions were mainly based around ensuring sufficient access to the remaining 35 acres in the site. So we wanted to make sure that those were available and competitive for us to market to other companies. So we just had to write a few of those things into the contracts. We finally settled on a contract for a purchase agreement that was signed on January 21st of 2022. And this does not mean the project was a done deal at that time, because we still had a lot of negotiation to go through before we got to the finished project. But that purchase agreement was a pretty important step, because that commitment from the company and that acknowledgement they were interested in moving forward really allowed us to kind of kick things into high gear with the conversations about the financial incentives with the Cabinet, and to start looking at other funding resources for the other infrastructure improvements that the city and the county were going to be making in the park. A lot of that grant funding and other sources of funding is not going to be on the table until you have some level of commitment. Over the next month or so, we did continue to work on additional agreements with the city and the county, separate from the purchase agreement with the Industrial Authority, to lock in everybody's interest and protect all those interests on the road extension and on the water and sewer expansion. Those are the two major commitments that we here in Breckinridge County were making to Atlas. Following that, in March, we really kicked things to the next level with discussing incentives with the Cabinet. Again, throughout that same time period, March and April, we were also continuing to work with the city on looking at some grant funding for that sewer extension. That sewer project in total is going to cost around $600,000. and that's an investment that we are actually still working towards completing. And that's kind of one of the loose ends of this project that is still ongoing, even though we've reached an agreement with Atlas and they are coming here. So we start to wrap up the cabinet negotiations in May. We met at Atlas in Louisville with myself and one of the cabinet's project managers. His name is Malcolm. Hi, Malcolm. Who was our partner on this from the cabinet. And we kind of started to finalize the details of that incentives application. Before that could be finally approved, it has to go before a board that we call KEDFA, which is the Kentucky Economic Development Finance Authority. And that board is who reviews and approves of all the incentives applications in the state. They meet at the end of every month, and because of the way that Atlas's application fell in the submissions, it was not reviewed and approved until the July KEDFA meeting. So it was the last week of July when Atlas received notification that they were eligible for a certain amount of incentives, and that was what finally allowed us to put a bow on everything. They did receive a significant amount of incentives because of the number of jobs being created. So this was a huge part of our negotiations. And we were able to close then, following that approval on August the 1st of 2022. So if you've been watching along in our timeline here, you can kind of see that from the initial site visit to closing on the property was well over a year in the making. And that whole time we were continuing to communicate, to move forward, and to work through these details. There was never a lack of communication, but just a lot of little things had to go into making this happen. So following the closing on the site, over the next 2.5 or so weeks, myself and Atlas's communications team worked with the governor's office to craft a press release so that we could make a formal announcement that this was happening. And so we were able to make that announcement on August 22nd in partnership with the governor's office. And there we go. Atlas is coming to Breckinridge County. Of course, the other piece of this on the PR front is that we did also plan the groundbreaking ceremony, which happened in October. And that process began way back in March as well. So we first contacted our friend Martha Jane King, who's our representative with the governor's office in Breckinridge County, about the Atlas project in March, and let her know this was on the horizon, this was coming, and that if we were going to do a groundbreaking, we wanted the governor to attend, and we wanted him to do his tour of the Area Technology Center. Atlas, because they're wonderful folks and have invested so much in our school system, from the beginning wanted to make sure that tour was part of their groundbreaking ceremony, which we were so grateful for. So we let them know this was happening and then held back until we had the formal announcement. The very week that we made the announcement, I wrote a request to the governor's office and to him personally to not only attend the groundbreaking, but to do a tour of the ATC and make sure to emphasize the partnership between these entities. So we've talked about a timeline here going from April 2018 all the way to October 2022 on one project. It took all those little steps to make this a reality, and all those many partners. And we're so grateful, of course, for all the help that we got and for everyone's patience. But we definitely want you all to know that we are always, always, always working on these projects, even if we don't get to tell you, even if I don't get to advertise it. And so I'm grateful for the opportunity now that we've concluded this one. Well, we still have a lot of work to do, but concluded it to a sense, that we can have a discussion about all these steps and what it takes and the work that we were doing to make this happen. So as always, if you have any questions about any of these topics or the work that we do, we'd be glad to answer those in a further video or conversation. And until the next time, thank you all for watching.